Hey, what's up, everybody? You tuned in to another episode of Strategic Moves. I'm your host, Ken Dow. This is a place where we bring art, culture, politics all together, and I do it every Sunday right here on this podcast. But when I'm not shooting this podcast, I am the owner of Strategic Resources and the founder of the African American Men's Action Network. We call it Amen. We specialize in political campaigns, government, and public relations. Been doing it all around the state of Ohio for over 25 years. And met some interesting people along the way. And this program gives me an opportunity to bring those people onto the program. We get to talk about some of the things that we've been through in our lives, some of our experiences. And hopefully there's something in it that you will get out of it that will help you in your business or personal life. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, all I need you to do is hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and the notification bell as well, so that you will know the next time this program's coming on. So before we get going today, I want to give a big shout out to the best podcast producer in the game. That's none other than DJ True. What's happening, brother?
What's going on?
Oh man, just getting through everything. We're doing our special here on Black Women and History for Women's Month in Cleveland. And on the podcast today, I got somebody who I know for quite a while who's coming in and do some talking to us about her experiences in life, and maybe we can help a few people along the way. So what's going on with you?
I had an interesting weekend. I was with a good friend of mine, DJ Low Key.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he had a big bridal trade show. It was called Shade's Bridal Experience, catering to a lot of the unsung heroes that are African American that cater to the wedding industry. He put a lot of Black-owned vendors on display at his event, and it was really nice.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. You know what? I never really thought about that as a business, but I imagine it is one.
Yeah,
but
there's a lot of Black wedding planners, event, a mixologist for your bar, food caterers, people that make cakes. So he put a lot of those people that don't get into today's bridal showcases and those big ones at the IX Center. It was special, man. I want to give shouts out to him, and we looking to get him on the show soon.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, we're trying to get him on soon. So, yeah, definitely. He's been doing a lot, and we definitely can have him on there.
For sure. So that's how my weekend went.
Excellent. We're going to get down and get this program cracking. Today, I have somebody who, like I told you, I met quite a while. I think I can age myself. I had to be in my young teens, or maybe late teens, not early teens, late teens, maybe close to 21 or so, maybe 19, 20, when I first met her and her family. She has been doing a lot of work around Cleveland, and we want to bring her onto the program. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background about her. The guest that I'm bringing on today is none other than Miss Helen Forbes Fields. Helen Fields has a lifelong advocate for the city of Cleveland, dedicated her career in advancing racial and gender equality in the community. With over 31 years of experience at Forbes Fields and Associates, focusing on law and municipal finances, she also served as the vice president and general counsel for the United Way. Her educational foundation started out she graduated cum laude at Spelman with a BA in public and political science and earned her JD from Howard University. She also attended Loyola University summer law school in Rome. Oh, actually, she went to Rome to learn some stuff over there as well. She has an art advocate. In 1979, she marked her love for art and leading a significant involvement in art community, focusing on African American art. She's also has served in the Cleveland Museum of Art on the Cleveland Museum Art Board, and has been very instrumental in diversity and inclusion efforts there. She also chaired the board of Front International. She served on the board of MoCA and a Cleveland Art Prize Board. I got to get more about that one. Her community involvement engaged her in various different boards across the city: Caramoo House, Cleveland Zoology. How do you pronounce that, Helen? Cleveland Zoological Society and University Hospital, Rainbow Baby Children Hospital. She has numerous awards received in her community works. In 2019, she was notable woman in nonprofits by Kane Cranes and Cleveland Art Prize Special Prize in 2020, and the Progressive Woman Honoree by Smart Women in 2021. So everybody, I want to welcome Miss Helen Forbes to our program. Good to see you too. So before we get going in my program, the way I do it, I got to let everybody know a little bit about your background and your business. Everybody may think they know who you are, but we're going to find out. So Helen, tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up at and that kind of thing.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. Appreciate it. When we got the email invitation, I said anything for Ken, because we've known each other for, as you said, for a long time. If you were only 19 or 20, that means I was about 22.
Yeah.
when we first met. Actually, I think you first met my sister Mimi.
Yes.
And then I met you after that.
Yes.
And, Mimi lives in Baltimore now, but anyway.
How's she doing?
She's doing pretty good. She's the sister that has lived around, has left Cleveland and lived in various locations. She's back with her true love, reconnected with him a few years ago, and they live in Baltimore. She loves being East, so that's where she is.
Excellent.
Doing pretty well.
Excellent. Yeah, I met her. She was the first person I met back in those days. She was cool. She's still cool. Yeah, she met me and we got cool for. And you know what? I tell everybody, I got in one accident in my whole life, drive. And the only accident I ever got in, driving those vans for the campaign. And Mimi used to have the vans parked at her house. Remember, she lived on Euclid. And we used to have to go up there and pick up the vans. And I went up there, picked up the van, came out this driveway, out Euclid, and ran smack into this lady's car, tore her car up, totaled it.
Sounds like it was your fault.
Oh, definitely. I can say that now, definitely, looking back on it. Well, I was like, man, I tore this lady's car up. And remember the police came and everything. And this was before cell phones.
Okay.
Yeah, and I remember having to find a landline to call up to the Urban League, to call Miss Powell to tell her I got in an accident. And Mimi came back to come get me and cleaned up the accident. And it was funny. I'll tell you this was the funniest part of the whole accident. The lady said, when I got into the accident with the lady and she looked and she said, do you have insurance? She's taking me through all of this stuff. And I said, yes, I got my driver's license and this and that. And I said, but this is not my van. She said, who van is it? I said, it belongs to George Forbes. And she said, okay.
She was all right.
She said, this will be all right. Don't worry, kid. She said, don't worry. He gonna take care of all of this. Exactly what she said. She said, oh, he's gonna take care of all of this. And it tripped me out. And Mimi came, took care of the van. Never heard anything else about the accident. But this is the part I wanted you to remember. This is why we got cool. The part that I remember is after that, you would think that one would say, man, you done tore up this van. Get out of here. We never letting you drive again. She went and got me another van. Hold on. Not only she went and got me another van, she got me another van and said, you're going to start driving me and my family.
Oh my God.
That's how I ended up getting that job, driving y'all around.
Okay.
So there it is. So Helen, tell us about growing up in your neighborhood back then. I let the cat out the bag so everybody know who your father is now. So tell us about growing up in Glenville before you made it out to Spelman.
I did. We grew up on East 114th Street in St. Clair and lived there my whole life. Grew up there, of course, and my sisters as well. I have two sisters. We just talked about my sister Mimi, and then I have a younger sister, Lauren.
Okay.
And went to Lutheran East High School.
Yeah. Okay. Still on Mayfield then? It was somewhere. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was. And there was always the Lutheran East and Lutheran West. And let me backtrack. I went to Cleveland Public Schools, went to Patrick Henry.
Okay.
And then my parents decided to pull me out. And that's when I started going to Lutheran schools.
Okay.
And Patrick Henry went to a small Lutheran school called St. Paul's, which was about 55th between St. Clair and Superior. And it was much worse. I did not understand why they pulled me out for St. Paul, but went to another and then eventually ended up at Lutheran East where I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I went to Ohio State for 1 year.
Really?
It wasn't like it is now, at least
Mhm.
with my kids, where you
Mhm.
go on college visits and all
Right.
that little sweet stuff. We didn't do that. We
Just-
you just got applications in the mail. You sent
Right.
applications off. And I had a cousin that was there, so I decided to go there. But I would say once I stepped foot there, I knew this was not the place for me. I had a cousin that went to Central State.
Okay.
Sat me down and wanted to talk to me about going to a HBCU. She did that about a week before I left for Ohio State. But
Okay.
it made such a huge impact. And I thought about going to a HBCU, but didn't really know
Mhm.
anyone who went.
Mhm.
And you get all these things in the mail from Ohio colleges. And like I said, my cousin was there, so I went there. And after a few months, I decided I wanted to give it a try to apply somewhere else. And so transferred over to Spelman and never looked back and was grateful for the moment I arrived.
How do you pick Spelman?
I picked Spelman was, I said, my cousin went to Central State, sat me down to talk about HBCUs, talked about Spelman.
Mhm.
And she had a neighbor that also went to Spelman who talked to me about it. And that's it. I thought about Howard. But the view among my parents and relatives was that DC was a scary place. And so I thought about Spelman, probably Hampton and Fisk, and applied to Spelman. I can't tell you much more than that, other than had a neighbor that I knew of, a neighbor of my cousin, and went. But from the moment I landed there, was grateful. I could have kissed the ground once I landed there.
How about how made you make the decision to go to then Howard?
Look, I went to Ohio State 1 year, had experienced a PWI, as they said. It was not an enjoyable situation for me. Ohio State is huge. It was just my own personal experience, maybe 50,000 students. You were definitely a number.
That's correct.
And then I went to this new place that was totally nurturing, very supportive, and cared about whether I succeeded. And I never felt that when I was at Ohio State.
Really?
And I wanted to continue in that type of education and knew at Howard that Thurgood Marshall had attended there, and it was a well-known place. And I wanted to go back to Howard, which was where I wanted to go originally, and go to DC. I was real interested, as you can imagine, in legislation and Capitol Hill because of the way I grew up.
Right.
And that was actually my thinking, that I would go hopefully to school in DC and think about being involved somehow with someone on Capitol Hill and write legislation. But things took a different turn, but that's all well and good. But I ended up there. Actually met my husband there, who was a year ahead of me in law school, made some amazing relationships and friends, and was really steeped in this social consciousness of practicing law, being available to your community, providing for your community, and making sure that you can serve, to ensure that justice is served on your own community. And became really steeped. I probably have been steeped in that for my entire life, and it's part of my DNA. But then I got to these two institutions that really reinforced that way of thinking, and my professors did. My fellow colleagues, fellow students did. And so I was home when I got to HBCUs.
So how was that transition, and how did you make it to Rome from there?
Oh, the lucky thing is, growing up, we traveled. My mother and father would take my sisters and I on trips and vacations. Now, we didn't travel anywhere like Europe. We traveled mostly in Caribbean, but definitely I had the bug of travel and not afraid to do. And I was in law school, and there were some postings about going to summer school campuses in various places around the world. I was trying to choose between going to Egypt, campus in Egypt, or Italy, and decided to go with Italy because during college I developed this amazing interest and love of visual arts.
Okay.
And then so I decided I want to go to Rome so I could see all the museums and the artwork that I studied while I was in college. It really was law school, and taking law classes was secondary to seeing as much art and all of the things I had learned in college, being able to do if I went to Rome.
So I'm gonna get into this art thing because I didn't really know you were into art as much as you into art until me and Daryl started working on some stuff together, and he had mentioned it and was like, "Oh yeah, Helen's very into art," and then just doing some other stuff, realized, oh, she's really into art. So let's step a little bit back into community and stuff. So once you finished school and you came back home, I imagine, and what was your thing that made you get into the family business, or was that just written, I'm going into the family business?
Yeah, when I started college, you have to take your core requirements and other courses, and I took a music history course at Ohio State, which had amazing resources, and I liked it. And who would think that? So when I transferred, went to Spelman, they didn't have the same type of music history classes that were available, but they had art history, and I was interested in art. I wanted to know why things were so popular, what made a work of art so revered and well respected. So I started taking art history courses, and I got hooked. And I would take an art history course, even though my major was political science, but I would take art history course every semester, and followed a professor who was very supportive as well. And then I thought about becoming a curator. It's interesting. I have friends who are curators, and they all say that they always want to be lawyers. And then here I am, a lawyer who wanted to be a curator, but couldn't quite understand where you would take that career. How do you even make it work? Going back, I guess if you go back a few years ago, the same thing when I went to Ohio State, didn't really know about anybody going to HBCU. You follow a path that you're most aware of, which I think is really a response about exposure to as many things, how important that is.
Yeah.
To
I was
really
thinking
open
about
your mind about possibility.
I was thinking about that when you were talking about that y'all went on trips as young families. And I'm just even thinking about back then, because that isn't like trips today, back then even. And you, like you say, you did the Caribbeans and stuff, the exposure that to be able to get your kids out of Glenville off 114th and take them to various different places, which allowed you the ability to even have the ability to dream.
Yeah. And you had to believe that we would go on these trips, and this was in the 70s, and we were often the only Black family.
That's what I'm getting at, right?
In the hotel.
Right. Exactly.
We would have episodes all the time, boy. We learned how to stand up for ourselves really early on.
You had somebody who was going to make sure of that anyway, I'm sure.
Well, my father was on vacation to get away from all that, right? And then we would go, and one time we went, I think we were in Aruba, and the woman told us to get out of the pool, my sisters and I, because there was someone there who needed to swim in the pool, and we needed to get out. So we learned to take up for ourselves very early. I know we had another episode where a woman came up to me and asked me, was I a flight attendant? I must have been 18 or 19 years old. Right. But she was trying to figure out how on earth we could have been at this hotel and traveling. Wow. So we would always have those type of negative interactions. You're trying to take a vacation, enjoy yourself with your family, and you always get this additional stress or stressor to deal with.
Can you remember the time when your father decided he wanted to run for office?
No, as far as I can remember, he was always in office. He became councilman first in 1963, so I was only 3 years old.
Wow. So you, like you say, literally he was always doing that.
Office. And then by the time I was middle school or high school, that's when he became council president. Then he was starting to take on more power. Okay. And that would bring a certain reaction from classmates. And you just learn to live with it. I think no one really understands it other than my own family or my sisters, what that all was like. But we've had some opportunities that we never would have had without my father being involved in Cleveland politics and to the level that it was involved. It was pros and cons. I read about, they talk about the crazies in MAGA and Trump land and going after these judges, and I can't remember the word now, where they're calling police on, all of that, or people just show up. We used to go through that kind of thing.
You're right.
This growing up was like the norm. Bomb threats being called, people calling and saying horrible things or sending horrible messages. I have a framed article that someone sent my father, and it was an article when my father was in council. It had to be early 70s. And the person is referring to him. He's at a jail, visiting the jail and the conditions at the jail. And the picture is showing him looking through the cell. And the person who sent it made a comment. It goes into this long litany about civil rights and you niggas and what you don't deserve. And at the end, he has a swastika.
Wow.
And at one of the ends of the swastika has a person that's hanging.
Wow.
And at the very bottom of that, the person writes, "A good nigga is a dead nigga."
Wow. Wow.
And that was sent to him, right? Those were the types of things that we saw growing up and would experience, and my parents would have to protect themselves and us and our family. But I can't say being in Glenville, it really felt that.
Every time we say Glenville, we roll that horn.
Uh-huh.
So that's why you go hear that. Let me ask you a question then. Because the question was give me a good thing and a bad thing. So you gave me a bad thing. I can imagine what's up, but that's pretty bad. So give me a good time about when you were growing up and, like you say, being the daughter of the council president.
In some ways, I related that because I'm hearing about these stories of people having this occur now. And to me, like I said, it became a norm, but it also allowed you to develop a certain shield to protect yourself. And so those were teachable moments too that probably weren't all that bad. I certainly learned about discrimination and racism and how it exists. When I look at that newspaper article that a person took time to actually cut out of the newspaper, write a message and send it through the mail. Hatred is that deep. And that was in the early 70s. But sometimes I think it's not that much different today in many respects. And so
that's true.
I'm not naive. But I learned that since I was about 10 years old or less. And so I've been able to take those kind of episodes, and that helps to guide how I think and respond today. So maybe it wasn't all a negative because we certainly were taught lessons as a result of that. But yes, we had other opportunities that we just would never have entertained. When my father was in council, people that were high up in the party, the Democratic Party, would come here to Cleveland, and he was always entertaining. They would come to our home on East 114th Street.
That's correct.
And some names people don't remember anymore, but people that were running for president, Mo Udall, that's a name that's probably a flashback from years and years ago. I remember he was in our backyard addressing neighbors about running for president. Scoop Jackson, these are names from years and years ago, but I was a little kid meeting these senators from all around the country who would come, and he would tell them, you have to come right here to East 114 and St. Clair to talk to our neighbors and talk to the people who live in this community to learn about what the needs are. And being exposed to that and those types of people, it was just pretty amazing. Jimmy Carter, being able to meet him. And we have become very close to his son, Jack Carter. Jack lived here for a few years. My father stayed in the White House. He flew back on Air Force One with Jimmy Carter when he came here 1 year and stayed at the White House in Lincoln's bedroom.
Really?
And so when Jack moved to Cleveland, he sought my father out, and we have remained very close to this day. We talk pretty frequently, especially now since his father's so ill.
Mm-hmm.
But having those types of relationships that come from those years of my father's, career. So there were pros, there were cons, but there were definitely more pros in terms of life lessons.
So how was it working for the family business? How was it now? I'm working for dad. My kids work with me, but you ask them about it, they on and off all the time.
Practicing law is a little different. You have to be there. And I worked at the firm for 31 years. I was partner there and worked really closely with my father for those years. And I'm grateful for having that experience with him. It wasn't so much working in the family firm. It was just practicing law.
Okay. And
I just didn't like it. I never did like it.
Really?
I was good at it, but I never really enjoyed it.
So what did you do there? What was your specialty at the firm?
So it ranged. I started off doing public finance, and that's without getting too technical. The lawyers draw up the documents that are involved to issue bonds.
Oh, bond finance.
And the bonds are used. And they were used to build new schools or roads or office buildings for the state. So we worked a great deal for the state of Ohio, some with the city of Cleveland. We worked for the school district, all types of political entities that we would work with over the years. So I did that for about 10 years. And that's very technical. So you talked about Daryl. Daryl has done that his entire career. I did it for 9 or 10 years, and that was enough for me. And then I moved into litigation, which is completely opposite. But I wanted to be able to touch people and understand their issues. But clients are a fickle group.
And you didn't want to do that.
Clients are a fickle group. So you try to keep your clients happy. Some stay happy, some aren't. But it's a toll. And litigation you have your opponent, essentially, the person on the other side. And it can become very argumentative and stressful. And so I was just tired of it. I was tired of going to court and the whole litigation area. And I always wanted to do something different. And so after 31 years, I left. Yeah.
So where did you go when you left? Did you go then to the United Way?
I did.
You went straight to United Way?
Yep.
So tell us, what did you do at the United Way? United Way is a big place.
Yeah.
And it's huge. So you were United Way here, Cleveland.
Yes.
Okay. And so what did you do for them?
Yeah, I held a variety of positions, but let me just say, when I first went over to United Way, I had a very close friend who became CEO, Augie Napoli. And I met Augie because I was a board member at Cleveland Museum of Art. And he had been at the Cleveland Museum of Art, working there very high up in management. And so he went over to United Way, and he and I talked one day because I was really eager to do something else. And we talked about me coming over, and he brought me over as vice president of community impact. And in that role, I supervised, I headed up the entire area of allocating the dollars.
Okay.
So when Anyway had their campaign, raised the money. And when I was there, we were raising $33 million a year.
That's a lot.
And you had to decide where the money would go and to what nonprofits. And so I headed up that whole area.
Wow.
And it was just an amazing education into nonprofits, what nonprofits exist in Cleveland and in the county, the amazing work that they're all engaged in, and how they really are here to serve the community. And so from there, I did that. Then I managed the 211 system. I became executive vice president, and I also was general counsel. So I handled legal matters as well. So it was a pretty full portfolio of work. And I think by the time I left, I was doing board management as well. So now I was doing more of working with the board members. And at that time, and it still may be, there were 75 board members.
Wow.
And working on our board committees, as I said, doing the general practice of law there, handling our contracts. I oversaw our committee that we have with the grant we have with Medicare and Medicaid. So I did a variety of areas and work there.
What was you most proud of when you worked there? Anything that you worked on that you really like, you know what, this is what I'm most proud I accomplished while I was there?
And I'm so happy you said that, because I was forgetting that I really started our race, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts at United Way.
Okay.
And when I was there and with Augie's leadership, it probably was the first time United Way really focused on racism and poverty. And who's in poverty in the city of Cleveland, and what
you would almost think that they would know that already.
Well,
right?
I won't say that people didn't know it. It was just about saying it out loud.
Okay.
Because I also oversaw the GIAGA office, and that's a much different view in terms of what poverty is. It's a much different population.
You want to explain it in detail?
GIAGA, it's a much different population. It skews a bit older and white. And so those who live in poverty are mostly those people who are white that live out there.
It's more rural,
in
right?
GIAGA, rural community. And they don't believe in even saying poverty. We were told that, actually. We don't say poverty.
Really? No?
No.
They don't believe they're in poverty?
No.
But they are.
They self-sustain. They are to self-sufficiency and pulling yourselves up by your bootstraps. And I don't mean to make light of it, because I worked with some amazing people in GIAGA, but there were some others who just had a certain viewpoint on what poverty looks like. And that's exactly why they move out to GIAGA County.
Really? That's deep.
In Cleveland, we really addressed racism and poverty.
Okay.
And child poverty, which is huge here in Cleveland. Senior poverty is huge here in Cleveland. In terms of we're one of the cities who lead in childhood poverty and senior poverty and working adult poverty.
Okay.
And so many of those individuals happen to be of color as well. And so we instituted a race, equity, inclusion mantra, very focused on it, and our work in that area. And I headed up all of that as well.
Excellent. I'm going to talk a little bit about your arts history, and we're going to close on what you're doing now at the YWCA, but let's talk about art a little bit. I noticed that you were on the board with the Cleveland Museum of Art and a few other boards. So you told us your passion and how you got it. How did you get in on the board at these places, and was just working your way around, and that passion for art?
Yeah, look, I won't deny in the very beginning, I'm sure my last name was helpful. And I can't say that I was seeking to be on the board, but I first started because I was so interested in art. And so I became involved in various committees at the Art Museum. I would go to activities at the Art Museum. Then MoCA, I started going over there, and that's Museum of Contemporary Art. And I don't know if you remember, they used to be in that old Sears building, which now has been torn down by Cleveland Clinic around 80 Carnegie. And so I started going to these activities because I loved seeing opening of shows and hearing artists give lectures. And I was one of the few, I was like the Black lady in Cleveland who loved, the young Black lady in Cleveland, which I'm not any longer, who loved art. And so I would show up for all these things and being involved. Ernestine Brown was a huge mentor. She and her husband operated Malcolm Brown Gallery. And so she nominated me to be on the women's committee at the Cleveland Museum of Art. So that was the way where you started to learn and meet people at the art museum. I went to a few of those meetings. That really wasn't for me. It skews a bit older. And at that point, I was new to Cleveland. I probably was in my late 20s. It wasn't quite, and I worked in many of their activities were early in the day. But it offered an opportunity to explore the various groups that exist at the museum. And so I was asked at one point to join a committee, and that committee was focused on the construction of the art museum, the new construction.
Okay.
And that happened because I met a board member while I was in Leadership Cleveland.
Okay.
So it's all kind of serendipity, right? And you meet people, they learn you love art. And it wasn't just that I loved art, but I knew art.
Okay. You got to know it.
And so then things just snowballed, and I was asked to join the board.
So what does the board member do?
I can give you a kind of a legal definition is to be a fiduciary for the board, and you're there to advise about a museum's responsibility. I look at my role as really being a member of the Black community and making sure that what the museum does, and that they have programs and they collect art and have exhibitions, which will appeal to a community, a Black community, brown community, because we all have a right to see ourselves at the art museum. And so that's what guides me in my interests, in my perspective.
Yeah, and then you start an equity and inclusion thing there as well, or?
So I headed up the committee to develop a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. And that was instituted, I think, in 2018.
So which artist inspires you the most?
So I love a variety of artists. I would say Elizabeth Catlett, who's deceased, but she created some amazing sculptures. It's definitely a favorite of mine. I'm thinking of some of the things in my home, and we have a sculpture. Another woman, Selma Burke, who created the image of the dime of Franklin Roosevelt on the dime. Black woman created that image.
Hold on, she created a dime on a dime.
I'm sorry, not the dime. the Franklin Roosevelt. If you pull out a dime,
okay,
Franklin Roosevelt's image is on the dime.
Okay,
she created his image.
Oh, okay.
Never was given credit for that.
It. Really?
Until she was about 80 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. And so she created some amazing sculptures as well. And I love.
So it sounds like you like sculptures, huh?
Those just happen to be a few that Elizabeth Catlett didn't do just sculptures. She did print. She was a wonderful printmaker as well. Up to date artist is Hank Willis Thomas. He does some really provocative.
I'm only looking at you like I know these people. I don't.
So you can go, you can read them and look them up when it's so there's quite a few. And I think my all-time favorite artist is Romari Bearden.
And why?
It's huge. And he used collage as his method, that he would create these collage works and create images out of them. So he would literally, he was known for collecting, or had a huge collection of pornographic magazines. And out of those magazines, he would cut maybe a woman's arm and a leg or a face, and he would put them all together. So he would take a picture of an arm from one photograph, right, and he would create these amazing images. Really? And he tried to get his friends to join him in this, and they didn't quite get it. But he's recognized as probably one of the greatest collage artists, along with Picasso. So he's my all-time favorite.
Excellent. They just had an exhibit I saw on Channel 8 the other day, I think over there in University Circle. They have one of those buildings over there. I think it's that black building. It looks like a funny shaped building right now.
So that's Museum of Contemporary Art. That's MoCA.
That's MoCA.
Yes, that is MoCA. Okay. Go there. And actually, they don't charge admission anymore. So go to MoCA. Yes.
When they was doing it, I was thinking about, I said, I should go through there with my camera, because I was thinking about you coming on the show. And that's what I was thinking. I said, Helen's coming on. And it came on, and I was looking at all this art. I said, you should go through there, take some pictures of the art, and kind of blend it into this program somehow. So I was thinking about that.
Well, ask the guard first before if you can take a picture.
Because you really can't always take pictures in there.
And never touch, but I know you know.
I know never touch, but I didn't know that. You can't just walk in there with a camera.
It just depends on what it is. Some works are very light sensitive, so they wouldn't want to.
I'm glad you said that, because you know me, I'd have been in there.
Yeah.
All right, now we're going to break it down. We done got through that. Got a good sense. Now let's talk about YWCA. That's where you at now, and you are the president over there at the YWCA. And tell everybody, for all my millions of listeners that watch my program who may not know, what is the YWCA?
So The YWCA Greater Cleveland provides services and resources to the community, and many don't even understand the breadth of the work that we engage in.
Mm-hmm.
Our main office is right at 40th and Prospect,
Mm-hmm.
and we actually operate 3 separate facilities.
Okay.
So we have several programs right there at 40th and Prospect. We operate the women's shelter right on 22nd and Payne. And we have a building on the near west side called Cogswell Hall. It's located on Franklin Boulevard around 66. And so our focus and our mission, first of all, is to eliminate racism and empower women. Mm-hmm. And we do that.
That's good. Good.
Yeah. We live out our mission by addressing homelessness, mental health services, and education. Mm-hmm. So on our main building right there at 40th and Prospect, we have our early learning center. We have children that we're preparing for kindergarten, age 3 through 5. Mm-hmm. And most of our children have suffered some type of trauma, often related to homelessness. We have some families who live in shelter while their children are going to school, preschool with us. Mm-hmm. We have on our second floor 3 apartments. We call it Independence Place.
Really?
And it's designed for young people, age 18 through 24 years old. Many have aged out of foster care or have experienced homelessness. And this is where they can come and stay with us. We have those 23 apartments. They're efficiency apartments. And we're teaching young adults how to be self-sufficient. You have to have some type of disability. 90% of our residents have a mental health diagnosis. And I would state, if you moved from home to home, living in homes where maybe refrigerators were padlocked, not really taught skills, you would suffer from a mental health diagnosis as well. And so those are the young people that come to us. We provide life coaches to really help them think about where they want to be when they leave our doors. We encourage them to stay with us for 3 years, at least 3 years, because we find if they do, they won't end up back into homelessness. We're encouraging them to get their GED. Even those who can go to college, maybe go to Tri-C or to develop job skills. And we have some young adults who can't do either one, but we're trying to provide programming so that they have some enrichment and can really learn not just to survive, but to thrive when they leave our doors.
I never knew you guys. That's a lot of social services you guys provide there. Was there a point in time where the YWCA started doing more social services and maybe I'm wrong. I thought the YWCA was almost like the YMCA. And from my understanding of growing up, the Y over on St. Clair, I didn't know the Y did any programs like that. We went there to play basketball, swim, all the recreational stuff that they did. Was there a point in time where you guys started pivoting towards more of that, or was that always the mission of the YWCA?
I would say, and what I know now, first of all, the YWCA has been around for over 100 years and always focused on women and women's empowerment. In fact, when this YWCA started in 1868 here in Cleveland, it was really right after the Civil War, focused on providing help and assistance for women right after the Civil War.
So it probably was always
very much focused that way. We're known for having one of the first pension plans for women.
Really? Okay.
Nationally. But I think when Dorothy Height worked with the YWCA in the 70s, as civil rights icon, that's high cotton, as my daddy would say, with Dorothy Height, she really declared that we should be very focused on eliminating racism and empower women. And so that was a declaration back in the 70s. And so different YWCAs live out that mission differently because you address the needs in your own community. So where we're addressing homelessness and preschool education, another YWCA in Oklahoma may be focused on a whole different area. But But most of us, we're all around that mental health, that homelessness, that child care education that pretty much guides the work that we engage in.
So you say you guys also have a women's shelter.
We operate the women's shelter, only women's shelter here in Cleveland. Norma Herr Women's Center at 22nd and Payne. And we see about 225 women each night who are seeking shelter with us.
Wow. You guys doing your part, because isn't there an uptake in homelessness right now?
Absolutely. And our numbers started to skew upwards in late spring, early summer. And that seems to coincide at the point where SNAP benefits were being decreased, eviction moratoriums were ended. All those COVID-related incentives that existed were going away. And then our numbers definitely started to increase. We were before about an average of 190, maybe 200 at the most. And summer, we were seeing 235 women seeking shelter. Now we're starting to level out, which is really odd because it's the winter and you would think it would be just the opposite.
Right.
But you can't always put your finger on what's going on. But what we know, the increase has occurred in all of the shelters, not just with us. But we're focused only on women.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that the city had received some funds to try to help deal with the homelessness. I work with a group of developers downtown who were talking about what was going on as it relates to the tents and the things that are going on in front of their property and their businesses. And it's just a hard position everybody's in, because you have a business and you got to run your business and they don't have a place to go. So they feel bad when they try to push them off the property because they know they don't have no place to go. It's one of those things like that. So I never knew you guys was doing that kind of work.
Yeah. And look, to be honest, most of our guests, and we call them guests because no one should be a resident of a shelter.
That's correct.
Many of our guests suffer from a mental health diagnosis as well. So there's layers that are involved in terms of what leads a woman to be in a shelter. I can tell you can certainly see many of the women who seek shelter with us. There's been years of housing instability that they've lived through, food insecurity, mental health issues, where you see who's diagnosed or who isn't, who receives medical care and who doesn't. All those types of factors weigh into how a woman has ended up at our doors. And then we could have someone who, just because of life circumstance, has come to our doors. We had a woman come to us several months ago who lived in Rocky River. Her husband left her and her life just took a downward spiral.
Wow.
And then she ended up coming to Norma Herr. And she came to thank us and said we saved her life. People have a typical view of what a homeless individual, and actually we call them unhoused, what an individual looks like, but there's really no typical face of who seeks shelter.
Wow. And one of the things I know that my son works with organization NORA, which is Women's Recovery Center. And we was just talking about the homeless thing also. And it's that every day they have to leave and they don't go too far because they want to be able to get back in to the place that they just left. And there's no holding that. It's like first come, first serve, right?
No, when we took over the operation of the shelter in, I think, 2018, Paige, that was our leading requirement, that we would not tell women they had to leave every day. And
Really?
so we don't require our guests to leave.
Okay.
First of all, it's cruel. If it's 10 degrees outside and you tell someone you're going to leave at 8 o'clock and figure it out where you end up, and you can come back and see if you have a bed at 6 o'clock. So we just made it very clear. And that's before my time. And I'm glad of that. And we still hold true to that.
Okay.
And now women look, these are adults. Okay. So some do leave the shelter during the day and they seek out their own medical care, or they're picking up their medications from pharmacies or other activities. But I've told you many are suffering from mental health diagnosis as well.
So
But
how you deal with that, Helen?
allow them to stay with us all day if that's what they choose to do. And we don't, let me just say, we are a low barrier shelter.
Right.
And that essentially means we accept everyone. And in some days, look, it is a cramped, crowded place.
Nobody never moves on to that next.
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say our average stay is 90 days.
Oh.
We do work with women
That whole time you
to
working.
navigate them to housing.
Gotcha.
And really to encourage them to move to that next level and to get housing.
Women with children, I imagine, is something that you guys jump right on. Those are
we don't have children. We only accept women. We don't cater to families. There are other shelters who do that.
So there are shelters. Zelma does that. Okay. So you just do women.
We just take in women.
Okay. Let's talk about the children. The people you said that you guys are doing that for kids who may be aging out. That's different than the Jane Etta Hunter kids, right?
I can't speak to what's going on at Hunter. I can only tell you that the young adults who come to us have been previously unhoused and are seeking housing.
They're a certain age though, right? They gotta be
18 through 24 years old.
Okay. All right. No, they're different than the Jane Etta. Jane Etta Hunter kids are younger, and these are kids who are probably was in foster care or something, and the foster parents just dropped them back off, or they just left. And now they come down there with no place to go.
They age out at 18 years old.
Yeah.
And so many have not had family members that have been there in their lives. That's why they're in foster care. And they don't really have advocates or supporters that are there to help them navigate the world. I've often told people, I have grown children now, but I could not imagine any of my 3 adult children at 18 years old facing the world alone and trying to figure it out. And those are the young adults who come to us. They have to face the world alone. And so we're there as their advocates and their supporters, and really to help them get themselves together so that they don't stay with us forever, but that they have some type of foundation so that they can move on and make it in this rough world.
Do you think it's easy? This might be a crazy question I ask anyway. If you were 18 going through that, you think it was easier back when we were doing that than it would be now as a kid at 18?
I don't know if it would have ever been easy just to try and make it.
Maybe more support?
These are young adults. Some don't even have a driver's license. And so we're helping them get a license, or they haven't learned how to drive. They don't have high school diplomas. They're trying to find a job, but not really sure how to do that. So we have this amazing computer skills program that we do it in partnership with Olivet. And teachers come in to teach you computer skills and teach you how to write your resume and how to go and look for a job on the computer, things like that. I don't know what life was like for you at 18, but first of all, brain development, at least most males, I believe, isn't truly completed until about 23 or 24 years old. I have 2 sons. Some would argue even later than that. So everybody needs some type of support and advocacy.
The reason why I said, and that's the word advocacy. So let's stay on that point. Reason why I said that was that I just believe it was the community had a better sense. So that I believe that some of the stuff where now you have to be lucky to find a program like yours and others, in some areas, the community was able to support you a little bit better. And that's all. I don't think it was a cure, just a little more community support, and you might have been able to pull it off better. That's all.
And that may be a cultural thing, right? Where some cultures come all together and bring folks in who need some help. Years ago, when I was actually a volunteer at United Way, this is years and years ago, I think I heard this statistic about Black people taking in their relatives. We were known for doing that. We would have that informal type of adoption process within our families, and you just take your relatives in. And so that may be more of a cultural factor, but I think many families are beset by issues or mothers or fathers that can be related to just a long list of things, from substance use and living in poverty, and the things I listed before, just housing instability, not really having a stable home themselves. So it's just a litany of issues that come falling down on a person. What leads a child to be placed in foster care could be just a tremendous amount of issues. And the problem is, once they age out, for many, there's nowhere to go.
Nowhere to go. So what's the future of what you would like to accomplish while you're there at the YWCA, while you're at the helm?
Yeah.
Some things you'd like to see?
Let me just say, it's an amazing opportunity to be at the YWCA. We're doing just absolutely wonderful work. I have these dedicated colleagues who have been there for many years. I'm now here for a year and a half. And so I'm just putting my small stamp on the YWCA, whatever it is I can offer. I am committed to bringing together all of my friendships and my relationships that I have gathered through this long career, and it's almost 40 years now, and trying to see how I can take all of that and bring some good from those relationships to the YWCA. So however I can do that and make use of some of these relationships and friendships, and bring my friends along with me, and many have come along with me to assist me. But however I can take all of that I've been engaged in, and people that I've been able to meet, going through those years, from even when my father was in counseling, people I have met throughout the years, to make them aware and make sure they understand the job that I'm doing, the work that's going on, and how important the work is, and however they can support us is so appreciated. And if I can bring a few more folks on to join us in this ride, then I'm more than happy to do so.
Excellent. I just got some closing questions for you, and we can get out of here. First one: if you could change places with anybody in the world, or anybody dead or alive, for just one day, who would it be?
I have never, ever thought about that type of question.
Picasso?
Yeah, an artist, I'm sure would be one of my artists that I just mentioned. But the artists that I really love right now were engaged in their craft back in the 20s and 30s. Oh my God, what a perilous time. So I'm not sure I would quite want to go back there. Although I would love to go back and be engaged during the Harlem Renaissance.
Okay.
Yeah, I would.
Somebody back there around that time of the year. But what's your guilty pleasure?
Guilty pleasure? Watching home decorating videos. That's that takes my mind off of all these heavy issues that I've just talked about, which I probably think about 24/7. But the moment when I don't is looking at home decorating videos or art exhibitions too. Yeah.
Something you wish you was better at?
I think just making sure that I'm fully expressing the work that I do. And if I could do that in a much better fashion, I want to make sure that I'm expressing the work that I'm engaged in, and that everyone that I work with, that we're engaged in, and getting the message across effectively. So I want to be able to do that as effectively as possible. And I don't know if I'm always able to do that, but that's something I definitely want to make sure I do it as well as possible.
What's the best compliment anybody ever gave you?
That I've helped them to feel better, or that I've been a nice person. Yep, I've been a nice person. And sometimes I'm not always a nice person. So I appreciate when I've been
somebody told you
a nice person.
Really?
That makes me feel good. Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
What's the worst bit of advice anybody ever gave you? When you listened to them, either you did, that was some terrible advice.
I think any advice that tells you to stay in a box and don't go outside of that box and don't explore or don't try to take advantage of as much life as you possibly can, is the worst advice you could possibly receive. My children, I've told them throughout the years, you really seek out interests and work that really drives you and that interests you, because we all had to get out here and work for at least 40 years. You want to be able to do something that you can fully commit yourself to. And that's the type of advice that I'd love to leave with someone. And so an individual that wants to keep you within a box and not to go outside of that is the worst advice you could possibly receive.
And my last one for you, can you give us a moment or a time or something that you think about that brings you joy, that never cease to make you laugh, feel good? You sit back, you think about it. It could be the first time you saw your kid walk. It could be any of that.
Any moment that I spend with my 3 children.
Just think about it.
Is a thrilling, happy moment for me. And they don't live in Cleveland.
Right.
So anytime I see them and I'm able to just spend time with them, it's just, it makes life worth living.
Excellent. Helen, you did a great job in coming on our program. You answered all my questions. Great. And I think honor for you to be here. And as I say, we're going to be pumping you up for Women's Month, and you're going to be amongst another group of women, a nice group of women. And I appreciate all of y'all coming on here doing it, especially you. And so what I do at the end of all our programs is we give you that camera right there for you get an opportunity to look there, say something. You can give information about how they can get in touch with the YWCA. They can, anything you got on your heart you might want to leave. Camera's yours.
Don't forget to look up the YWCA Greater Cleveland. We have amazing programs. I didn't even touch on everything. We have a racial justice challenge that is coming up in April. I invite everyone that's listening to look up our racial justice challenge and to participate. It's a wonderful way to be very introspective about how to be an anti-racist, and an amazing program that we provide for 21 days. So look up YWCA Greater Cleveland. You'll find wonderful information about the work we do, and look at Racial Justice Challenge.
Excellent. So I'm going to have all the links in the description and under the title of our show, and in the description, we'll have all the links of how you can get in touch with Helen Forbes Fields over at the YWCA, and links to the YWCA so that you can get in touch with them and see what they got going. So until next time, peace.